Hello, I'm Julian Steckel, I'm a cellist, and I welcome you to today's Handel music tutorial. We will talk about the wonderful Dvořák Cello Concerto, and we will start with the first movement. So I will play now the first two bars of the cello entrance, quasi improvisando. So with all inner freedom and expression, but still with this idea that Dvořák had a very clear and strong rhythmical quality in mind. Let's look at the next example. We could, for example, start in 136, which is the last four bars of a longer bridge that leads into the second theme in bar 140. He writes pianissimo più tranquillo. Tranquillo does not mean play immediately much slower. The ritardando only starts in 138, which is, I think, a very, very important marking, because also here we have a tradition that this whole passage starting in bar 130 immediately has a slower tempo. I think that is a pity. So I'm always trying to really create a big bridge into 140. So also here we are facing, again, a tradition. I mean, I'm not against traditions at all, but this, the markings, Dvořák's own markings, range from pianissimo, dolce, molto sostenuto to piano, dolce, so molto sostenuto, and definitely not that would be forte espressivo, but he actually writes a slur into 140 and pianissimo or piano, dolce e molto sostenuto. I'll try to find this very intimate, inert sound. Also, what is very interesting, he writes 100 as a tempo. This is much faster than most of us, me included, often play. I know it's an easy attraction that we fall for, to play this slow and take more time, but I think we should always try to rather follow what tempo the master himself, Antonín Dvořák, had in mind. Let's jump into bar 157, which is a bar before the 16 arpeggios, which many of us are fighting with. And so on. What are we dealing with here? First, the left hand, we have double steps. And in the lower voice, you see, not really in tune. So this is a place we really have to work on. In our right hand, in our bow hand, a completely different thing. These arpeggios, he writes it with a slur and little dots beneath it. So it means we should not play them legato, completely with a lying bow on the string, but a little bit lighter, possibly to make the bow even jump a little bit. So, but we also have an orchestra behind us, so we cannot play that piano. So we have to find a compromise, of course. I'm trying to find that compromise by having a really straight angle with the bow and a string, not too much like that, but rather like this. I'm using all the bow hair and not too much bow, and a fair amount of pressure. Just enough pressure to let the bow jump a little bit, but also still have a good connection into the string. I have to practice this too, every time. Let's go to another difficult place of this wonderful first movement, which is bar 257. So we see two systems. The lower system is Dvořák's original notes. The upper system is, the upper system is definitely a little bit easier to play, maybe even a little bit more showy, a little bit more light, brilliant, and yeah, I personally always loved to play the original. It's very uncomfortable, I admit it, but I think it's really worth practicing it. And I'll give it a try now. Talking about difficult bars, bar 266 is also one of the key places in the first movement. It's this big octave place where we finally reach this massive explosion in fortissimo. What is very important in practicing is that we organize ourselves well before we jump into onto the playground. And what I do is first I divide this long line into a first part, which is an octave. Hopefully it's an octave, and then there are 6 more notes. And then we've reached, hopefully, our goal. Now we're already in the coda of the first movement, and I will start in bar 337. It's a fortissimo entry into a chromatic scale, which is not starting on the downbeat of the first beat, but it's a one and. So I think it's important to mark this entry very clearly. 1. So there are just a few things that I would encourage you to think of. First, I was talking about the entry into this chromatic scale. Although I'm always rooting for very economic movements of the left hand, here I would say do the opposite. It's very important that we even hear the impact of the fingers into the fingerboard. Otherwise, it will sound like a glissando, which we don't want. Now this chromatic scale is continuing with chromatic 6 double stops, and it's important that we have fast and late shifts. Otherwise we have too much, again, a glissando feeling, which we don't want. Yeah? Okay, so when we have finally arrived in the second last bar of the cello part, he writes molto ritardando and sforzati on each quarter note. And it's very important to help your musical partners, the conductor, the orchestra, or the piano accompaniment, to mark the second beat. 1, 2, and, because on the end, on the second part of the second beat, the orchestra or the piano starts to play. You heard that I played quite a glissando in the last note. I would always advise not to play it too slowly, otherwise you will be swallowed by the orchestra sound, and one only hears lead glissando and not the final note, which would be a pity. Let's have a look at the second movement, Adagio ma non troppo. This time we also have a tutti before we start, but not such a long one. Our entrance is a special one. The woodwinds start on a full beat, but when we take over the line from the oboes and clarinets, we'll start with an upbeat on the third beat. This is bar 9 with 1 quarter note upbeat. And it's very important that we feel that we are still part of the descending line of the clarinets and oboes, and that we're not just leaning forward like that. So it's rather like leaning backwards and then finding into this bar like that. That is very important. And then let's remember how the first solo entrance in the first movement started in the cello. There couldn't be a bigger contrast, I think. He writes piano dolce, so it shouldn't be too shiny, too brilliant, but very warm, very intimate, very introspective, so to say. It's like thinking of home, being far away, having this idea of an idyll on your mind. Let's go to the next example, which is bar 16. Here we have changed our role already. We are accompanying the orchestra with this beautiful line. Although we should, of course, not be in the foreground because we are accompanying the second voice, a very beautiful one though, it's important that the first note, a C, on the G string is not too hidden, you know. It should be clear. Otherwise, which is my experience, we won't be heard at all, which is a pity as well. So with a certain substance in the bow, not too murmuring. What is also important, I think, in these 16ths or in lines like this, that it's not too regular. It should be free, as if invented in the moment. Let's go to the next example, not far away from that. We start in bar 20 and we will talk about bar 21, which provides a very big change of color. And we will talk about how to change this color. We start in bar 20. So you hear and you can see that we start in a pretty dramatic manner, and then we change the color on this long C and the slurred C. It's like dimming the light. Yeah, it's or really like changing the scenery in the movie. It's like looking up in a completely different room. How do we do this? We start with, of course, with a very heavy bow arm, forte. I would advise not to vibrate immediately too fast, because we have to reach this fast vibrato in the piano. So I would start with a little bit of a wider vibrato, almost senza. And you see my bow is starting to shake because the vibrato is making the cello move. So let's just try it again. Just once more, I almost start senza on this high C. That would have been the example, maybe a little bit extreme, but to demonstrate how to change a color of sound within one bow, I think that should be pretty clear now. Let's go into the next example, which is bar 42. The mood has again completely changed. The orchestra has started in bar 39 with a pretty catastrophic entrance, even in G minor. Almost destructive with very heavy 16ths. But we answer with the most, I think, heartbreaking line and melody one could imagine. He writes, forte molto espressivo e largamente. Largamente means that, you know, also the small notes, the little triplet eighth notes, should not be played forward, but really with a lot of density and resistance. Also, this theme is written for the D string, and although he writes very cleverly in the orchestra parts, piano and pianissimo, we have a lot of partners, not enemies, partners that we have to play with, and we have to make ourselves heard. So let's play with a very dense sound. I'll try to demonstrate it once. The next example is related, so to say. If we look at bar 65, the orchestra again almost crashes in with a lot of power and violence, and this time we answer differently. We try to answer also with a very strong entrance, which is bar 68. But interestingly, in 69, we have an immediate color change already. I'll play and then I'll describe a little bit what I'm thinking about. So you have heard that I entered on the C string with a big forte with accents on each note. But in bar 69, immediately after forte piano, it changes into something almost butterfly, yeah? Or like a little water, what is that? A little river trying to find its way. Yeah. Technically speaking, we're dealing with double stops. On the left hand, and in the right hand, we have to be as soft and as light as possible. Almost like you know, with no bones in the arm, like as if we had wings, which unfortunately we don't. The next example leads us and leads the music into a little cadenza, and we start in bar 105. We're taking over from the horn section, which has just almost finished. Also, again, one of the most glorious, wonderful, beautiful moments of this piece, an amazing choral. And we start in bar 105, and then we lead over into this cadenza, which starts in 107. This has a little specialty. Left finger pizzicatos. Normally that would be a bass or cello group doing this, but now we're alone. I'm demonstrating this now. I'm trying to, although you know my little finger is not especially meaty, I'm trying to create the best, you know, possibly warmest sound I can. Slow movement and a feeling of resistance against the string, and not too much like this. Yeah, it shouldn't feel sporty at all. Very special place, I have to say. Let's continue in bar 146. We start this bar alone, but in the next bar, 147, a bassoon joins us. We play double stops, and in bar 146 is exactly when the bassoon enters. We should be aware not to rush. On the third beat, we have a triplet, and again here he writes little strokes on each of these triplet eighth notes. Let's not rush. Really try to play together with the bassoon, with a proper body language. Now I just interrupted in bar 148 with another little thing. We have a trill with a fermata. And it's always a question how to organize this. The little C sharp and D before the next bar, we play together with a clarinet. And of course, sometimes we have a conductor to help. But it's even more important to know exactly what we will do, even without a conductor. So what I try to think of, or to do actually, is I'm counting loudly now to demonstrate it. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that would give the little 16th notes at the end of the bar a whole beat. One can surely discuss about this, but it's been a solution that has helped me on stage a lot. And we will have a look at the third movement of the Dvořák Cello Concerto. Let's jump right into the beginning again. What I find interesting is that Dvořák originally writes mezzo forte. In the first print then, and also in all editions that we play nowadays, in almost all editions, it's a forte. But I think it's worth imagining or really thinking about that. He didn't want it, he obviously didn't want it to be as loud as possible. And also given with a very nice accompaniment in the viola and cellos, this idea of a mezzo forte or forte risoluto almost gives it a certain swing. I'll try and demonstrate, and then try not to be too loud now. For me, the character is something extremely proud and should never fall forward. Even though there's a lot of fire in the music, you know, a lot of spice. I love this entrance, I have to say. The next example would be bar 49, and every cellist who plays this concerto knows it's a little difficulty, a task, to finding this entrance, because in the bars before the orchestra is playing with really, you know, with triangle and stuff, and it's really loud. It's actually impossible to hear oneself. So good luck finding that high spot there. I want to explain how I practice this. I think it's important that we don't play these little notes down here as a certain tremolo, but really misurato. So it's eighth notes. So I'll try to divide both voices now. As I do with all double stops. Also important, in my opinion, is bow distribution here. Stop, stop. And now we should have reached a frog. Not too early like I did now, because then we feel locked. Let's go to the next example, which is in bar 143. We're entering a beautiful dialogue with the clarinet, which always reminds me a little bit of the second movement when we play. Here we have a pretty similar role. We're also playing an accompanying figure around this incredibly beautiful of the clarinet. Really one of the most lovely places in this piece, I think. Let's go to the next situation, so to say, next place, which is bar 177. We're again facing pretty wild, loud and lively arpeggios. I'll play it quickly first, fast. So on. So what's important here is that, I'll play it slowly now, that we are always in the right position with our elbow. We should avoid to be too late. So the elbow always prepares what's coming later and next in the hand. So when we play this slowly and piano, preferably dolce, all the joints should be soft. Elbow is leading, the wrist should be soft, and the fingers should be reactive. And then we speed it up slowly until we reach our original tempo again. It's a place to watch. I always practice this place. So let's go to the next spot, which is bar 203. We have many notes, to be precise, 17 notes to be played within 2 beats, which is pretty impossible, I have to say. So there's a little trick that I find works really well with all the orchestras and conductors that I've played this piece yet. And it's very simple. It's just adding 1 beat to this bar 203, and I'll try to play and count loudly to demonstrate what I mean by that. 1, 2, 3. So it's 1, 2, 3 and ba, instead of 1, 2 and ba, because within this 1, 2, there's no chance to really play these notes. So I encourage you to try this, and I do hope Dvořák would have approved. Let's go to the next place, which is 281. Again, we're playing together with the clarinets and the bassoons. This is an incredibly beautiful place. Again, it feels like a lullaby, like a song, you know. And he writes forte. He doesn't write forte. He writes piano, molto e cantabile. And I think what's important when we're thinking about a lullaby is when we're trying to, you know, to make someone sleep and relax, is that we don't play too dense, but we allow ourselves more freedom in the sound, more air and more, I don't know, like more sitting comfortably. And I'll try to create a color that I use more bow, and that produces more, I don't know, more vibrations. Something like that. I think it's always important in these places when we're entering in a real dialogue with the woodwinds or with anybody, that we are able to hear what's happening around us. This is, anyway, it's one of the most important things in this piece of music anyway, because it's like a huge piece of chamber music. So there's no chance, there's no way that we just play our part and expect to be followed. Often it's the other way around. We have to follow, which is beautiful. And also, which brings me to the next place, which is the bar 333. The orchestra plays this theme. They play, especially the clarinets and bassoons, and I react with. The next spot would be bar 377. It's important because we are preparing for, I would say, a certain takeoff. And this takeoff happens in bar 380. And it sounds like that. I'll play it slowly now. So this scale or takeoff is actually much faster. And you play this absolutely alone. So this is also one of the spots that when I play the Dvořák concerto, I really have a look at, because you want to feel secure here. The next little specialty is, as I said, in bar 377, preparing this takeoff. So we are going to talk about the thumb a little bit and the sound quality that this note needs. You know, one could also play it pretty nakedly without a vibrato. But the thumb, you know, I mean, it sounds especially thin if we don't take care of it. I think. And so I would encourage to make a little exercise out of this and really practice a proper thumb vibrato. It might take a while and it might even hurt a little bit in the beginning, so don't overdo it. As soon something starts to hurt, you make a little break. But I think it's absolutely worth to exploring the quality that you can also create with a thumb. All right, we go to the next place and have a look at bar 437. Dvořák writes Minimosso and a tempo of 84 for the quarters, which is, if you turn on the metronome, surprisingly fast compared to many recordings and you know, this tradition that we have already been talking about. And I think it's so important and it makes so much sense what he writes, because the whole place is slowly starting to relax, to calm down, you know. And I think we shouldn't be too slowly 50 bars before he actually writes it. So I would encourage to really feel this beat. 1, 2, 1, 2. Only some pizzicatos. It's like barely any pulse here. And so on, and then, you know, the orchestra is having this massive sunrise, and one is being swallowed by it, so to say. One is, you know, disappearing somewhere. It's a magical moment, I think. So, but what is important again in 489 is that with at least 1/2 ear, we should be with a timpani player, because that's the pulse and that's the beat. That's the only thing that we have. It's a beautiful moment, which I love a lot. Again, we're talking about chamber music here because it doesn't make any sense to just play this beautifully, so to say, without knowing exactly which role one has to fulfill at the moment. Thank you very much for sharing this little journey with me by having a look at this wonderful piece of music, the Dvořák Cello Concerto. See you next time and goodbye.